Tonight on Dr. Phil Primetime, the unsolved murder of 28-year-old Jennifer Harris.
Jennifer was pregnant. She was found naked, face down, and by God, I want justice.
I've been doing criminal investigations for over 25 years. All of the evidence points towards one suspect. He said he didn't believe that she was pregnant, but then he offered to pay for an abortion.
I don't want the truth to be known.
What was your understanding of how the uterus came to be absent? Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, you know, tonight is very important, particularly for a small group of people, but I think you're going to all find this very interesting. We're turning our attention to a haunting mystery that has gripped the small town of Bonham, Texas for over 2 decades. We're talking about the unsolved murder of 28-year-old Jennifer Harris. Now, on Mother's Day, May 12, 2002, Jennifer vanished without a trace. 6 days later, a fisherman discovered her lifeless body floating in the Red River. Her death was ruled a homicide, but to this day, her killer remains at large. Now tonight, we're going to revisit the details of Jennifer's disappearance, but before we do that, I want to add a dear friend and a legend in the world of true crime. She's been a friend for really almost 20 years. Former prosecutor, a tireless advocate for victims' rights, and the host of the gripping Crime Stories with Nancy Grace, which airs right here on Merit TV. Take a look.
Talk about a wolf in sheep's clothing. I have just come out of the courthouse here at Delphi, and I've got to tell you, it's nothing like you would ever imagine. All she's talking about is me. She lied to police. She lied in court. She got 25, which I think is like, you know, going to Kmart and getting a 2-for-1 special. Nancy Grace signing off. I'll see you tomorrow night, 6 to 9 o'clock sharp Eastern, and until then, good night, friend.
Please welcome the one and only Nancy Grace. It's good to have you here. I'm sorry for the occasion, though. We've got a bad one here, right?
Thank you for inviting me. It has been, in May, 23 years since Jennifer was murdered. I believe she was pregnant at the time, and this brings to the forefront that the #1 cause of death amongst pregnant women, it's not high blood pressure, it's not a heart attack, it's homicide. And I think back to when I was pregnant with the twins. I could barely walk at the end. I was in a wheelchair on the way to my show every night, but no one knew that. Can you imagine? The #1 cause of death amongst pregnant women is homicide. Jennifer was pregnant. She was found naked, face down in the Red River. And by God, I want justice.
It's astounding that you're going to hear the facts of this case today, and Nancy and I both are huge advocates of law enforcement. We want justice for the bad guys. We want them brought to justice. We support law enforcement in their quest to do that. Sometimes you get in these rural counties and they don't have a lot to choose from. They don't have big training budgets. They don't have technology, and they work with what they have. And sometimes you've just got somebody that kind of just takes the job, and they drive around in a police car, but they don't have a lot of training. They don't have a lot of expertise.
You're right. And it's not just rural areas, but Dr. Phil, you're right, especially in rural areas, there's no money. This is population 10,000 people now.
Yeah.
There's population 10,000 people in Bonham, Texas. And I'm not sure what the population was then, but much less, obviously. There's no money for training. They may not have ever heard of deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, much less how to test it, how to gather it, how to preserve a scene. It's so easy to Monday morning quarterback, ain't it?
Yeah, it is. And in this case, we've got a family that has never given up. They've never stopped seeking justice for this precious family member, and they're continuing. And this is a big step here for this to go nationwide, put heat on this case, keep it in the spotlight. They've talked to Nancy. They're going to talk to us together tonight. I want to introduce Jennifer's sister, Alyssa. She says that her goal is to shed new light on a cold case in hopes that someone somewhere holds the key to unlocking the truth. And let me tell you, so many of these things really get broken open because somebody knows something they don't know they know. And they'll see something, they'll see a story unfold like this and go, you know what? I do remember something, or I saw something, or you remember in the Gabby Petito case, people started looking at their phones and they said they caught the corner of a van in the edge.
You're so right, Dr. Phil. Yeah. There was an online sleuth, and I remember her name. Her handle was Red, White, and Bethune instead of Red, White, and Blue. And she had been watching the coverage, and I think including yours, and saw Gabby's Ford Transit that she so lovingly redid to travel the country in it. And out there in the middle of nowhere in dispersed camping, in other words, no hookups, no commodes, no showers, no lights, in dispersed camping, they see a Ford Transit, and she says, that's Gabby Petito's Ford Transit, calls it in. That's how they found Gabby's body.
So people that don't know what they know can sometimes be the piece of the puzzle. Let's take a look at this.
My name's Alyssa Wernick. Jennifer was my big sister. We grew up in Bonham, Texas. It's a small town northeast of Dallas, the kind of place that you could leave your doors unlocked. Everyone knew everyone. Jennifer was very vivacious. She was very feisty. She was very popular. Jennifer grew up with Rob Holman. They were kind of boyfriend and girlfriend when she was in the 8th grade and he was in the 7th. And they continued to be an item in high school. It was kind of like peanut butter and jelly. It was Jennifer and Rob. The wedding was big.
I, Jennifer, thank you, Rob.
Huge cake, huge dress, the whole 9 yards. It was around the time when she was renovating the house that they lived in Louisville that James was there. James Hamilton is a friend / partner in business, and what I learned was a romantic interest of Jennifer's. It was sort of apparent that they were spending a lot of time together, and that's when Rob was getting frustrated. So I believe she said, I want a divorce. She just moved back to Bonham. I first found out she was missing the day after Mother's Day, because on Mother's Day, I had tried to call her at my grandmother's. 6 days later, I received a call that a fisherman had found a body. And my dad, he drove out to the Red River, to the bridge. And I got in the car too, and I remember seeing my other family members, and the looks on their faces were just, I knew at that point it was her.
Well, thank you for being here. And I know that time has passed, but that people say time heals all wounds. Time heals nothing, right? I mean, this is still the same.
Right.
And I know it's difficult to talk about it, but you're not going to let this go. Fair?
Or I can't.
What were the events leading up to Jennifer's murder? You remember it very clearly, what was going on at the time and what happened the day that she disappeared.
Well, she had moved back to Bonham after her massage and wellness center failed to thrive. And I think she was ready for a new start. I think she was looking into job interviews, moving to Colorado or a surrounding state like that. She loved the outdoors, so she wanted to be in a state that was really beautiful. And she found out she was pregnant. And I think that's when she went into this mode of relationship building with Rob and going back to him and trying to make things work again so that they could take the next step and start this family.
And what did you think of that at the time? Did it feel right to you, feel wrong to you? I mean, what was your thinking?
Well, I didn't know she was pregnant until she was missing. It was my understanding, though, she had contemplated getting back together with him, and I felt like it was a step in the wrong direction. I thought that she missed having someone stable in her life, but it wasn't him necessarily, it was just someone. So I kind of encouraged her to seek working on herself first, and then another relationship would come in the future.
Is there anything you wish you had said to her then, as you sit here now, that you didn't say?
Yeah, I was living in Austin at the time. I should have said, move here with me, you know, come live with me for a while. I know you're in a hard spot. We'll figure this out together.
We're going to talk about how they found out about it, and there are things that bother both of us about how this was handled. We're going to talk about that when we come back. A private investigator thinks he knows who was involved in Jennifer's murder. We're going to hear from him, and Nancy can tell us in very rapid-fire fashion what went wrong with this investigation. We don't have enough time to talk about everything that went wrong, but you can highlight for us the main things. We'll be right back. What's missing in the investigation? There's a missing laptop, right?
I think he might have had something to do with the disappearance of the laptop.
That's pretty bold. Why would you say that?
The sheriff's department did nothing to help us with this case. It was just mishandled from the very beginning. From when her Jeep was found, they didn't secure the area, do the right procedures or anything like that. They just towed the Jeep, got into the Jeep, started touching everything. They just completely botched every aspect of it.
We went to the location of Jennifer's disappearance with private investigator and former Fannin County Sheriff's Lieutenant Darrell Parker. He shows us what he thinks happened that tragic night.
My name is Darrell Parker. I'm a former lieutenant with the Fannin County Sheriff's Office and now a private investigator. This is the starting point of the investigation because this is the last place that Jennifer was at before she disappeared. Jennifer came over here about 6:30 p.m. Christy Farr said it was almost 8 when Jennifer said, "Oh, I'm meeting somebody, I have to go." So we're leaving Christy Farr's house in the same direction that Jennifer would have left and headed towards this intersection with Highway 273, which is where Rob Holman said that he saw her approach the intersection. Rob Holman's statement to the police during the interview was that as they approached the intersection together, he saw her turn right, and he wanted to avoid any drama, so he turned left.
I went to go buy some beer. Saw Jennifer when she went through the four-way stop there in that 98, 78. I went north. I didn't know if she'd seen me or not.
Well, it didn't make sense because Fannin County is a dry county. She arrived here and parked her Jeep at about 8:11 p.m. When she got here, it was apparent that she was meeting someone that she knew. There was no signs of force. There was no blood or anything found at the scene. Jennifer gets into the vehicle of her killer. And from here, they go north. We really don't know what happened after that. Jennifer was missing for 6 days before they found her body. Jennifer's right eye was really swollen. I think she was attacked. I think she was with blunt force trauma and possibly strangled. The ex-boyfriend naturally would be a suspect, but in this case, he had an alibi. He was over an hour away. There were 2 witnesses.
I was at McDonald's till 18 p.m.
We really only have 3 suspects. We have Rob Holman, we have James Hamilton, and we have an unknown stranger. None of the elements of this case fit the random psychopath. That leaves these 2 suspects. This one has an alibi. The only legitimate suspect left is Rob Holman.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for what you're doing on this case. I know you've really put some time and effort and energy into this since you left the force and working with the family. What's missing in the investigation?
Not sure where to start. I think the first missed piece was probably where they found the Jeep. The Bonham Police Department didn't realize that she was missing at the time. They thought it was just an abandoned vehicle, so they towed the vehicle away. It would have been better if they had known and they had frozen the scene so they could process it.
There's a missing laptop, right?
There's a missing laptop. Jennifer's laptop was taken as evidence. They were supposed to download the laptop and see what sort of things were on there. Had she been communicating with someone, that sort of thing. Well, the laptop disappeared. It's nowhere in the evidence chain.
Now, Nancy, her father asked for the laptop. They told him no, and then it disappeared. What do you make of that?
My big concern is that apparently Jennifer kept a blog of her life, like a diary. What a treasure trove of information now. Let's face it, I've had to retry a murder case that was originally tried when I was in law school, and then I got to the DA's office and had to put it back together. There was one x-ray and a hat that said, "Kiss my bass." That was all my evidence. I had to start from 0. That was a huge property room. How big could the property evidence room be in this jurisdiction? So what happened to it? It didn't get lost. So who took it? How
do you answer that question? In a small town like this, the evidence room has to be fairly simple.
A closet.
What is the chain of custody on something like that?
Well, you're right. This was a small town, and I came to the sheriff's office about 7 years after Jennifer's death.
Right.
So I sort of walked into this, and the evidence room consisted of a room, but it also consisted of a couple of Connex boxes out in the parking lot. It was not the best situation. And then the investigator that was working on this from the Fannin County Sheriff's Office, I think he might have had something to do with the disappearance of the laptop.
That's pretty bold. Why would you say that?
Because
I'm not taking his side. I'm just curious.
Sure. After he left the Fannin County Sheriff's Office, well, let me back up. First of all, he asked the family if he could keep the laptop.
Okay, enough said.
Yeah, he actually also asked if he could take over her Jeep payments because she didn't have her Jeep anymore and he liked it.
Did he?
No.
He didn't take over the payments and keep her Jeep? But he asked if he could take the laptop?
Yes.
And do what? Use it as his own?
He thought it was nice.
Oh, my God.
There's something else missing, just off the top of my head. The keys. Remember that set of car keys were found not too far from that cottage and where her body was
Let's
found?
zip through this right quick. Small wooden shed was burned. No clothing was found. Was it burned in the shed? Is that what happened to it? I don't know. There's no purse found. The Jeep never was entered into evidence. Even after the fact, when they did discover that it was hers, they didn't enter it into evidence then?
They did some precursory checks. They went and searched the Jeep. They found a water bottle. They dusted the water bottle for fingerprints.
They found 2 water bottles.
2 water bottles, yeah.
Did they process them both?
I believe they did. I don't know the results of it. There was no report in the file when I got there.
I'm sorry, and I'm not challenging you on this. You weren't there at the time. You showed up 7 years later. How do you dust something for prints, process it, and there be no report? What happened to report? Did it go with the laptop?
And the car keys?
Yeah, I can't answer that.
You all just must be pulling your hair out. Okay, coming up, we're going to take a look at Rob's interrogation tape. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with me.
This particular witness left her house to go for a walk. Along her walk, based on the timing, Jennifer Harris and her killer would have passed her on the roadway. She made statements that indicated that she knew who Jennifer had met that night. In an interview that I did with her, I felt like she knew more than she was saying. So I was trying to appeal to her sense as a mother, and her words to me were, I don't care, that girl is gone, and I know the family.
Okay, that was Daryl talking about a witness who may have seen Jennifer's killer. Now, he admits there's limited hard evidence, but plenty of circumstantial evidence pointing to who killed Jennifer Harris. Explain that to me, because that's an awkward statement. It's like somebody took two statements and put them together because they don't make sense. What does that mean? I know her family, so what the hell does that mean?
No.
Explain that to me.
I think what she was referring to was Rob Holman's family.
Oh, what she thought was the killer's family.
She said, I know the family. To give it some context, this particular witness was involved in the cattle business, and so was the Holman family. And her statement to me, I know the family, to me, I took that to mean the Holman family.
Okay, and when I said the killer's family, I'm not saying Rob's the killer. I'm saying she was referring to who could have been the killer.
Right.
And that's the one person, and you say it's the only suspect, but he's actually not been named as a suspect.
You're right. Law enforcement is the only one who can name a suspect, but I can tell you from my years of experience, I've been doing criminal investigations for over 25 years. I've been working with the Innocence Project for the last 10 years on wrongful convictions. And all of the evidence points towards one suspect. There are no other legitimate suspects.
But in fairness to someone that's not here, he's not been named as a person of interest. He's not been named as a suspect. And we can't say that he was the killer. We'll just let the evidence speak for itself, and people can make up their own minds. Not taken up for anybody. I'm just saying legally, I'm not a lawyer, but legally that would be correct, right? Lawyer?
Completely correct. Not a suspect, not an official suspect or a person of interest. I
Okay.
do know he was taken in and Mirandized before he gave his statement, but that's SOP in that jurisdiction.
Now, Fannin County Sheriff's Department gave us permission to look at Rob's interrogation tape that was recorded 3 days before Jennifer's body was discovered. So they know she's missing. She was missing for 6 days before they found her body, face down in the Red River, completely naked. Now, the Red River's not rapids. If y'all know the Red River, it sometimes is just red, but no river. And sometimes it's just some water in it, but it certainly won't take your clothes off of you, right? It's not a rapid sort of thing. That had to be done. But let's take a look at 3 clips that, at least to me, stood out. Take a look.
I just get real worried and scared because I know that I don't have anybody to say where I was at that night. That's kind of what I've been scared of the whole time.
Okay, now he says that he has no one to say where he was that night. And why is that? What did the evidence show? Where does he say he was that night?
He was driving around for 5 hours drinking beer in the backcountry roads.
By
5.5 hours.
5.5 hours he was driving around by himself the night that she disappeared and we now know was murdered.
Dr. Phil, why does he want an alibi at that juncture? Because she was just missing. I mean, when I say, hey, have you seen your father? If I speak to the twins, they're like, oh, I need an alibi. She's just not missing. Why does he need an alibi?
Oh, it gets better.
Dr. Phil, why does he want an alibi at that juncture? Because she was just missing. I mean, when I say, hey, have you seen your father? If I speak to the twins, they're like, oh, I need an alibi. She's just not missing. Why does he need an alibi?
Oh, it gets better. Let's take a look at the second tape here. Rob contradicts himself on whether or not he recognized Jennifer when he crossed paths with the Jeep. Listen very carefully, and we've printed this out so you can follow his words. Take a look.
I didn't see her Sunday. I saw a Jeep, but I didn't see, I don't know who it was. I went to go buy some beer. Saw Jennifer when she went through the four-way stop there in 98, 78. I went north. I didn't know if she'd seen me or not.
Okay, that happened pretty quick. So I want you to look at this again and see what he said about whether he saw her or didn't see her. So pay attention to what he says right away, immediately when the tape starts.
I didn't see her Sunday. I saw a Jeep, but I didn't see, I don't know who it was. I went.
He says, I didn't see her Sunday. I saw the Jeep, but I didn't see, I don't know who it was, right? That's what he says.
That's what it says.
Okay, now go ahead.
I went to go buy some beer.
Okay, stop it. Isn't Fannin County dry?
Fannin County's dry
And he's lived there how long?
his whole life.
Okay, but he says he went in to buy some beer at a place that he's lived his whole life, and they don't sell beer.
Not in Fannin County. He'd have to cross the border to Oklahoma.
But he didn't. He was in Fannin County,
Yes, sir.
where he's lived his whole life.
Correct.
But then he never did buy any beer.
Well, of course
anywhere.
not. It's a dry county.
But I mean, he didn't drive over across the county lines. He never bought beer anywhere. It took him 5.5 hours to decide he wasn't thirsty.
Now, I have to tell you, I spent a lot of my career in deception detection and also getting to the truth. At this point, I'm going to slow down a minute and think, okay, here's somebody that says, I saw her, but I didn't see her. I was going in to buy some beer where they don't sell any, so I can drink it while I drive around for 5.5 hours on a night where she has disappeared and been murdered. At this point, my curiosity's tweaked. Okay, go ahead.
Saw Jennifer when she went through the four-way stop there in 98, 78.
Stop. Now he says, I saw Jennifer. This isn't a long clip. He says, I didn't see her before I went in to buy the beer that isn't for sale, but when I got through not buying the beer that isn't for sale, I saw her. He just said he didn't see her. Now he says he saw her. So he's contradicting himself within the same period of time. And by the way, I'm paying attention to a lot of things that are going on with his body language and all. He's lying about something, in my opinion. Doesn't mean he's lying about killing her or knowing what happened or whatever, but there's something called illustrators. Like if you're making a point and you want people to know it, you say, let me be very clear. And when you make the point very clear, that illustrator, very clear, you punctuate your words, very clear. And if you're making this up as you go along, those illustrators are going to be off. You're going to say, let me be very clear. It doesn't match because everything's out of sync because you've got an internal dialogue interfering with your body language. And this is all wrong. At this point, I'm throwing the brakes on, and we're going to be here a long time.
Can I make a point about this particular point? This is where he admits to being the last person to see Jennifer alive. And 7 minutes later, she disappears.
Yeah. 7 minutes after he admits he saw her, 30 seconds after he said he didn't see her. Right. This is all wrong. All right, coming up, Daryl asked Robert if he killed Jennifer. Find out what he said next. I was saying I've spent a lot of time on deception detection, and it is a skill set that you learn. It's completely different from getting to the truth. It's one thing to determine if somebody's showing signs of deception. It's another thing to say, okay, so what is the truth? Those are two different things. So what did he actually say in the interview about whether or not he was involved? Here are the questions. Daryl, did you have anything to do with the death of Jennifer Harris? Rob, no. Did you believe she was pregnant? Rob, no. Daryl, do you believe she thought she was pregnant? Rob, no. So in a 2009 interview, you asked him straight up, and he denied it. A lot of other things suggest that he was lying about something. To me, I can't say he was lying about whether he killed her or not, but he was certainly showing anxiety and fear and those sort of things. But You asked him straight up and he denied it. What'd you think about that?
Well, I thought it was interesting that he said he didn't believe that she was pregnant, and he didn't believe that she thought she was pregnant, but then he offered to pay for an abortion.
And he talked about this in the interrogation. We have a third tape. Let's take a look at this, where Rob tells investigators that it would be better if there were no baby, and that he offered to pay for an abortion for a pregnancy that he told you he didn't think existed. Let's take a look.
Or there's not a baby involved, it'd make things a lot better. I told her that if she wanted to have an abortion, I'd pay for an abortion.
Yeah, you not being a father, why would you pay for the abortion?
To keep her from saying that it was mine.
As someone that is trained in investigation, would this come under the category of motive?
Yes, yes.
He's been caught in so many, let me just say euphemistically, inconsistencies. He kept saying, well, it couldn't be mine. This hypothetical baby couldn't be mine. And then I believe you asked him, well, when was the last time y'all had sex? And he said the end of February. Well, I'm not a mathematician, but I can figure that out because she went missing May 12th. The end of February, March, April, May. And I believe there were other occasions where he waffled and said she had told him she was pregnant and he was the father. But he was involved in another relationship with another woman that did not know these two were hooking up.
May I have your permission to show a graphic, no pictures, some bullet points from the autopsy report?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that
Sure.
okay? Because
Yes, sir.
I don't want to be insensitive about, we're talking about your sister here.
It's okay. I don't want the truth to be known.
Okay. When you look at the autopsy report, I want y'all to pay attention to some of these bullet points. Left eye appeared normal, right eye puffy and bruised, no clothing, no evidence of internal organ damage, no fractures of skeleton, uterus absent, left ear absent, bloating. Now, what was your understanding of how the uterus came to be absent?
So first, the one where it says no evidence of internal organ damage, the medical examiner is not going to say that a heart is damaged if the heart is not there. He's going to say it's just missing. So in addition to the uterus being absent, the distal colon, the sigmoid colon, the rectum, and the appendix was also missing. I took the autopsy photographs, I took the crime scene photographs, I sent them to the body farm in San Marcos. And they stated that all of that damage was consistent with animal predation. So this is post-mortem, once the body had already been put into the Red River.
Mm-hmm. So animals got to the body.
Turtles.
Yes.
I think it was turtles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry that you have to hear this, but people need to know how terrible this was.
But I would also point out, it notes that the right eye was very puffy and bruised, you know, and a body doesn't bruise after death, and it doesn't swell after death outside of decomposition processes. So her right eye, like that, to me as an investigator, that is evidence that she received a very hard blow to the eye.
No x-ray.
Yeah.
Well, an x-ray was done. It didn't show damage to the orbital socket, but that doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
All right, coming up, Darrell says the Fannin County Sheriff's Department needs to step up now. Find out what steps Darrell thinks they need to take next.
Let's just get this thing done already. Stop waiting around. Let's get real prosecutors in there that aren't afraid of themselves. They're afraid they're not going to get a conviction. You know, screw that. We don't need that. We need people with balls. Like, go and prosecute.
Melissa's husband, Barry, says he would like to see the killer prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and has no problem with a plea deal if the murderous coward asks for a deal. Now, they're hoping the new DA and the new sheriff will bring justice for Jennifer, and we reached out to both. Now, the new sheriff said he was not familiar with the case yet, and he's just been in office for a short period of time, so I can understand how he needs to close the gap on this, and I hope he will. And we're going to talk to him and see if we can encourage that and help in any way we can. And the DA has not responded as yet. and the case wouldn't be to him yet at this point. So no disparagement of either of them. I hope they'll step up and participate. And you've had a dialogue with...
Yes.
And
Yes.
what's their attitude about this?
They're all ears and willing to accept help, willing to do what it takes for justice. I think we're at a great opportunity here, especially for you, bringing light on this case again and reviving it, because we now do have a new DA. They're cleaning up the whole place. And what we were dealing with before, and I'll say it publicly, were prosecutors who were afraid of their own shadows.
What's the attitude in the community? I mean, are people aware that this is still hanging out there? Are they incensed about this? Do they want this to be brought to justice?
Well, it's a small town, so word travels fast. In fact, I heard from my aunt that you were interested in this story the day that you even approached the law enforcement office in Bonham. So I think that anything that keeps a story going, meaning her case, is something that's going to be interesting for the people in the community. And there is a strong community for Red Rabbit justice and justice for Jennifer, a group of people who continue to support our case. And I think that they would definitely be behind it.
Go ahead,
There is
please.
a Facebook group, thousands of people who follow this case and have been following it. We've been following it just in the last 6 years with a docuseries, Justice for Jennifer, interviewing people who are more than willing to come forward and talk about Jennifer and talk about what they know.
What's the most meaningful thing you've learned out of all that with people coming forward?
That very first interrogation of Rob was all we ever needed. Law enforcement, for whatever reason, like I said, whether prosecutors were afraid of their shadows or whether everyone just knows everyone. And it is true. The gentleman from the Bonham Police Department, Kelly Warren, who was the investigator asking the questions, was married to Rob's aunt.
Yeah, well, in small towns, it gets pretty incestuous.
It really does. And that's why so often you have to bring in somebody from the Attorney General's office, because you cannot get an independent and fair investigation. And I was always curious regarding the autopsy. Her uterus was missing. Not that she had a hysterectomy, but they think that turtles may have preyed upon it. But I was always curious why she wasn't tested for HCG, the pregnancy hormone, because when you went to her home, you found a pregnancy kit with one stick missing, and you found prenatal vitamins. And what woman is going to take prenatal vitamins if she's not planning on keeping the baby?
Right. And just I want to add one more thing about her body. Rob would come to our house in the time that she was missing, leading up to when she was found. And immediately upon finding her body, the one question he had was, what was the condition of the body? And was she naked? And I thought that was very odd.
Was she naked?
It's a pretty random question.
And that's a statement of criminal knowledge. To be able to say what the condition of the body was without having seen it or having been there, that's a statement of criminal knowledge.
It's
Dr.
pretty...
Phil, she wanted to get back together. She wanted to get back with Holman. And this hurt my heart. I believe it was when you went to her home, her wedding album was open where she had been looking at the wedding pictures, and the DVD that Dr. Phil showed us earlier was in the VCR. She'd been watching her wedding.
Final thoughts when we come back. We're back talking about what probably sounds like a very unbelievably botched investigation from a small town. And look, not trying to be condescending about it, but when you don't have the budget and you don't have the training and all, I suppose that a lot of things fall through the cracks. And you've been keeping a record and doing investigations for like 6 years. You're willing to make all of that available to law enforcement, right?
Absolutely. And the great thing about law enforcement, the sheriff's office, is reciprocated. So I think that this leads to 2025 being a year to look forward to actually getting justice.
And with new people in there and a community behind it, and if we can keep a spotlight on this between you and I, then hopefully we can put some real energy behind this. And we did reach out to Rob. We asked him to participate, asked him to be part of this whole thing, and he said no comment. You can take that for what you will. And I've been very clear here. At this point, he's not been named as a person of interest. He's not been named as a suspect. He stated clearly that he didn't do this. And what's been offered here is opinion and evidence, and you can make up your minds about that. But he's not here to defend himself. And so, we can't say what happened here. We can say what happened here. You can make up your own mind about what his involvement may or may not have been. I wish he had participated and been part of this. We're going to keep a spotlight on this. I want to thank all of my guests tonight, Alyssa and Barry Warnick. Thank you guys for coming and standing up for her. Daryl Parker, of course, thank you for everything you've done and are doing on this. And Nancy Grace, thank you, of course, for being here. Remember, you can watch Crime Stories with Nancy Grace right here on Merit TV. And you can log on to merittv.com for more information about tonight's episode. And we're going to have a place there where anything you might know, you can share, and we'll make sure that we get it to the proper authorities. Thank you for being here. Good night.